Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martirano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Well, 2020, a year which no one will remember as a day at the beach, is coming to a conclusion. I trust it will. It has been, by anybody's estimation, a horrible, horrible year. And you know the litany: natural disasters, civil unrest, violence, and a worldwide pandemic to boot. Anyway, stresses have occurred on every individual and institution as a result of all that, not only here in the United States, but all over the world. Law enforcement is no stranger to those stresses. They feel it maybe more acutely than any other institution. We're going to find out what's going on with the police, how they're dealing with this year, and life as a law enforcement officer in general. This time on the Behavioral Corner, we're really fortunate to have with us a fellow who knows a little bit more than a little bit about police work and law enforcement and the problems associated with that. Govan Martin is a 29-year veteran of law enforcement. He's a member of the Pennsylvania State Police. He is now retired from active law enforcement, but he's certainly in no way forgotten about that area. He is actively involved and has been throughout his career in peer support programs. He was the head of that for the PA State Police for over a decade. He's instrumental in making sure that police get the right kind of treatment and can deal with the stresses of the job. He is particularly involved in suicide prevention. The figures for which law enforcement people try or commit suicide are staggering. So we're going to get into all of that with our guest on the Behavioral Corner, Govan Martin III. Govan, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for the offer. I'm honored to be talking on your show.
Well,
today.
that's great. Let me, Govan, is that Gaelic?
Actually, Govan is, from what my grandfather says, French. I am the third and probably last Govan in my family.
It's a cool name.
But I get asked that all the time, and then I've had various people send me information about the name Govan. I've met a priest actually who was from Scotland. He said it's actually a Scottish word and it means commoner, which he found hilarious. I've also had somebody say it was Welsh and it means strength. So I'll take any definition as long as it's good. It is one of those names that people always tend to screw up. But at the same time, when I always knew when in school when they're gonna call my name, because they always had that hesitation that first time. It looks like first day in homeroom.
It's a very cool name, but it does look like some letters were left off. But anyway, I just wanted to find out about that. Let's begin at the beginning with you. 29 years as a member of the Pennsylvania State Police. Do you come from a law enforcement background, family? How did you get involved in?
Yeah, my dad was a Pennsylvania State Trooper also, and he stayed in 28 years. In a lot of ways, I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps, and my dad was a legend at the academy who I think worked there his last 14 years. And actually, he got into the first class of peer support, inspired me then to do the same once I, kind of got my feet wet in the whole scheme of the regularity of being a police officer. So after 14 years, that's when I got in peer support.
Yeah. It's kind of common for families for police work or law enforcement work to run in families, isn't it?
Yeah. Also, too, we get a lot of veterans also that come from they go into law enforcement after they leave military service. So it's a great career. It's unique, but also it has its travails. It has its problems, and obviously, I think law enforcement is more scrutinized today than it ever was before. We really need to focus on how we can help them deal with the issues that are going on today.
Well, I have a theory that as a society, no matter how you feel about police work or police in general, or we can be no better as a society than they are as an institution, part of that society. And this is not, and we got to be clear here at the beginning, we're not here to litigate pro or police in any particular sense. We all know what's going on. We all know that there's been a movement now associated with the sense that the police, in some instances, are out of control and are indifferent, if not hostile, racially. That is an important topic and well worth discussing. We're talking about today on the corner the job of policing, the job of law enforcement, the kinds of people that are attracted to that, the training they receive, which is, I think, critical, and when they're in crisis, as they often are, but because of the nature of their jobs, what kind of help is available to them. So we'll be clear about that.
Absolutely.
So, Govan, let's talk about. Some of it's obvious, but I think some of it is not so obvious. What are the sort of typical day-to-day things, not associated with the calamity that we're talking about of 2020, that stress on police? What makes law enforcement more difficult?
You can always start off with the shift schedule. Shifts are actually, usually never the same. They're either 8 or 12-hour shifts, and you could go what we call triple headers work, a 3-11, 7-3, 11 to 7 shift, which is always hard on the body. They say that's usually one of the huge stressors physically, not only while you're going through it, but after you retire as well, because your body's not used to working, different shifts all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's getting better, but obviously that's one of the bigger things. Just that regular patrol stress right now, and the scrutinization just in your regular patrol. Everybody now has a cell phone, so when you make a traffic stop, it might not be an ordinary traffic stop where someone's taping your exact word. The things that people normally don't see.
Mm-hmm.
It's seeing going to fatal accidents. It's going to suicides. It's going to homicide scenes. You think that you can handle it going in sometimes, and there are a lot of people who it doesn't present a problem to, but others it does. And that's just the normal human psyche that, we have to deal with.
Yeah.
It's the odd hours that we work. Which also causes, just inherent stress,
Mm-hmm.
eating stress because we usually eat junk food. And because we're always on the fly, we're always on the run. I mean, we could go through a litany of things that make our job very unique. Just your sleep schedule's off. Because really, a police officer is not just working when he's on the shift. Let's say, working 8 to 4. You leave that job, people are always calling you for, your friends calling you, got a ticket, or some of our neighbors calling you, they're in having legal problems, or they've gotten robbed or whatever. People are always calling you because they think we have the magic words, or we know people that can help them. And we do, but we're all things to everybody. We're a priest, we're a friend.
Well, I mean, the things that you just described are, and again, nobody's excusing anything here. We're just discussing what this job is like. Let's face it, if that were the recruiting pitch you were just making, not a lot of people would want to be a cop. But I don't think anybody thinks about any of this. I think overwhelmingly people go into law enforcement because they do want to serve. Then you run into this situation where anybody who's worked a shift situation, no matter what it is, knows that that's taxing. It throws your body off. Long hours are obviously a difficulty in any profession. But that one area you just said about almost never not being a cop. The banker goes home. He's at home. He's not the banker anymore. He's at home.
Right.
A million people. When an off-duty law enforcement officer is in a situation that is problematic, whatever it might be, if it happened to me as a civilian, my instinct might be to call a cop. If I'm a cop, I can't call anybody. I got to be a cop then. So you're on call all the time, and then you add all the other stressors you just said about constant surveillance, unpredictable incidences to horrible events.
Well, even when you go by an accident on the road, it's
right.
like you should be stopping to make sure that everybody's okay.
Yeah.
You see a DUI on the road, you got to be calling in and maybe stopping that individual, or waiting to tell the officer, hopefully that somebody else comes, what they did. And also that causes inherent stress, causes also family issues as well.
Yes.
Because you're not home, you're working the holidays,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally there is a litany of items that, that we could really talk about of the stress that goes into being a police officer.
Well, we only raise it for the following reason, so that as civilians who rely upon the police or are, in some senses, put upon by them. A cop pulls you over, it's not, you're right away like, what's this about? What we need to understand better so that we can get better policing and safer streets and all that is at any given moment when you interact with a police officer, as a civilian, you can't be aware of what frame of mind that person is in, correct?
Absolutely. We have body cams, or the current law enforcement has body cams on now. It's so interesting of the reaction time that we have to have. We didn't think about it when, back in my day, in a sense, since I've been retired for 8 years. However, now then, you have to react in an instant because not only is your life that could be in jeopardy, but it's also the public that we have to protect. So there's an instant flight or flight that we're born with, that genetic component that we all have. And being a police officer, there is no such thing as flight. You have to fight for one, like I said, to protect the public and also to protect yourself.
These are common to any person who is in a kind of first responder position. Firemen, EMTs, all those people have similar calls to duty and stresses upon them. The difference, of course, with police is that they are armed and pretty much can lock you up. That's a very different dynamics. So what we're seeing now is a great attention. We all know what the attention is on. It's the racial overtones are obvious, but if we can move beyond that and talk about what kind of training recruits get to prepare them for this. And I realize real world experiences are really the only thing, but tell me about a recruit who wants to go into law enforcement. Your background was the state police. For instance, what kind of psychological evaluation is a recruit given before they go on the force?
I can talk about state police, and I think it's occurring in a lot of departments today, is that usually there's a psychological evaluation even before you become, just to apply to be a police officer. But we know that psychological evaluations aren't the answer sometimes, because there's an old saying that policemen are usually, whether it's true or not, I think some of it partly is, police are usually wannabe priests or wannabe criminals. So, and there's a slight difference between them because, it's the good guy that has led a clean life, whatever, but it's the wannabe criminal that actually knows how a criminal would act.
Well, make
him a better police officer?
Yeah, I understand that. But let me ask you with regard to, isn't it worthwhile when training young people who want to go into law enforcement to make sure you don't have someone who is perhaps potentially aggressive, overly aggressive, or hostile, have views that might interfere with clear thinking and good policing? Sometimes I get the impression that what's going on with police is that it's not that they're bad people, it's just that they're not trained well. They're not ready for this job. This is not an easy job, and they don't look like they're really ready for it. Is any of that true in your mind?
Again, you can train somebody to actually, put somebody in a classroom and have somebody listen to whoever the instructor is. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to change that person's tendencies. We have good and bad in every profession. However, there are those positions that we have in life that people trust, the church or law enforcement or any type of politicians, whatever, that we're placed in those positions where they're going to get highlighted even more. But because of what we do in police work, that we do have to arrest people, and we do have to possibly, obviously take them into custody or engage in some type of physical altercation with, depending on the circumstances involved. Obviously, I think that you have to look at the whole situation as a whole. Obviously, training is good, and repeated training is necessary, but also keeping track of those officers who are involved in those altercations to see, if it's heightened and to see what we can do to stop this. I think that really, and hopefully overall, that police work, should be, and police officers and departments should be scrutinized more. Just like in any other profession, you're going to get that 5 to 10% that ruins it for everybody.
This is an institution, an organization, policing, law enforcement. We're as a society, we cannot afford bad apples. Chris Rock, the comedian, said, you don't hear American Airlines say, look, most of our pilots can land airplanes, but a couple can.
Yeah.
We really, it is ridiculous when you put it in that context. The only way you make sure that there aren't bad apples is, I think, pick the right people and then train the hell out of them. Hey, we're talking about all of this. We're going to get deep into it. By the way, we described this litany of particular stresses on law enforcement. When we pick this back up, we're going to talk about the results of this. They manifest themselves in high blood pressure and insomnia and heart disease, diabetes, just post-traumatic stress. It's an amazing toll police work can take on law enforcement. We're hanging on the behavioral corner with our guest, Govan Martin the third. He is a retired state policeman from Pennsylvania, 29-year veteran, now actively involved in, and has been for a long time, in peer support and suicide prevention. He's hanging with us on the corner. Govan, I'm going to just go into the bodega over here, grab a bag of chips, and then we'll pick up our discussion.
Every storm runs out of rain, according to the great Maya Angelou. Her words can remind us of one very simple truth: that storms do cross our paths, but they don't last forever. So the question remains, how do we ride out this storm of COVID-19 and all the other storms life may throw our way? Where do we turn when issues such as mental health or substance abuse begin to deeply affect our lives? Look to Retreat Behavioral Health. With a team of industry-leading experts, they work tirelessly to provide compassionate, holistic, and affordable treatment. Call to learn more today. 855-802-6600. Retreat Behavioral Health, where healing happens.
Govan Martin is our guest. We're talking about peer support in particular. How difficult is it to get police or law enforcement people to come in and ask for help? I'll bet you that's a particularly big hurdle, right?
Absolutely. I think in any, especially profession, as we know in suicide prevention, men have a hard time asking for help. Now you're putting them into a position where, the last thing that police officers, military, first responders want to admit is that they need help themselves, because they don't want to appear weak to their fellow coworkers. So it is a hard thing to get them to come in and ask for help, because we live in an environment that, again, we're scrutinized, not only scrutinized by the public, but more so by our own people that we work with. So we surely don't want to admit that we're weak in any category. We all have things that happen in life to us. Before we become a police officer, before we become that veteran or first responder or whatever someone happens to do, we all have what I call an emotional backpack because of the things that we deal with when we're working. Obviously, law enforcement has a high rate of divorce. Obviously, law enforcement, we do have, they say 15 to 18% have, some sort of PTSD symptoms. And because of the things that we see and do, obviously our problems can be heightened because we really are not taught in training how to cope with the problems that we have.
Yes. That
are usually the stressors. We need to do more.
Yeah. Let me ask you if it's also not true that they don't come in for counseling or support because they're afraid it'll affect their careers.
Absolutely. They're afraid of trusting the person that they're talking to. And again, I've heard some horror stories that, people go into an employee assistance program or peer support and that it's not kept confidential. And if it's not, yes, you can actually maybe be put on what was commonly called the rubber gun squad back in the 90s and early 2000s, depending on what kind of help you're asking for. It's just like a, mark on your record that you went to see a psychologist.
Right, exactly.
Or because the perception is you're weak. The perception is, do I want to work with this person?
You're not fit. You're not fit for duty. Yeah, right.
But that's not the case. I really need to say that before you want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
We all need to ask for help for whatever we're dealing with. that really changes the way we coping or dealing with the stressors that we have. And if it's more than just that, we're feeling just the regular stress in life, if it's interrupting our sleep, if it's causing, physical symptoms as well, not just, mental health. If I got a broken arm, I'm going to go to a doctor. If, I'm dealing with a divorce, if I'm dealing with, I can't get the picture out of my mind after, seeing some type of traumatic incident, then we need to go and just talk to somebody. The everyday stressors that occur in police work, and in life in general, that, there should be no problem just going to talk to somebody and sitting at a chair across from somebody saying, here's what I'm going on. What can we do? And how do I get help?
Can you describe a typical, if there is such a thing, fit for duty evaluation? How does that work?
Well, usually that a supervisor would see some things going on in the person's career that would lead them to believe that there's like somebody coming in late for work. And then it escalates into, maybe arguing with the public and maybe getting in an altercation. Things that are obviously detrimental to that person's career or to the department as a whole.
Or to the public.
Or the public.
All right, so here's my question.
Go ahead.
No, my question is this. Look, you're 29 years on the state police, and I don't expect you to answer this personally, but how does it work if I'm on patrol with somebody I've been working for a while, and I see behavior that I think is problematic? I don't mean violent. I mean, I wonder, is my partner okay? Do they go to the partner and talk to them, or is this sort of cone of silence that descends over this so that, cops in stress don't get the help they need anyway?
We don't really have partners anymore. There's always manpower issues in law enforcement, because we don't have the money usually involved, as we saw back in the 70s and 80s, with Adam 12 and all those police shows. I can't think of any, like SWAT or whatever.
Yeah.
You see people driving around, in duos and partners, and the only time we're really with somebody driving in a patrol car are midnight shifts, and that's only with larger departments, and or when it's like a coach people session with that new person coming out. But do we see things that happen? Absolutely. Is there a cone of silence? I'm sure there is, and it does exist. And hopefully, again, that's why we're teaching a lot more police officers to do like crisis intervention training, not only for how to deal with the public better and teaching de-escalation skills, but also recognizing that our coworkers also are having problems too.
Yep.
And so that some of the training involves is going to talk to your coworker and saying, hey, I've noticed you've been really different lately. What's going on?
Yeah.
But also teaching supervision as well on the signs on what to look for, like underneath the surface, because it's not always
obvious. Sure.
Visible.
Well, nobody is in a better position to notice and I use the expression bad apple faster than their colleague. So, when police and the atmosphere changes to allow that to happen more freely and without threatening somebody's career or something, I think, the hope is that the quality of policing and the stresses associated with it might all diminish. Then we'd have what we want, a force that serves and protects and doesn't often look like, an army of occupation. I know we have spent a lot of time, and this is a big, big topic. We could go on and on talking about this is a tough job. Anybody, I don't care what you think about the police, it's a tough job. The stresses on them affect us directly, sometimes horribly so, as we know. But let's talk about...
Yeah, Steve, can I stop you for 1 second?
Go ahead.
And I think when you brought up a point about that police officers see other police officers all the time, that's partly true, but like for some of these incidents that we have seen occur across the country, where acts that we abhor, is that might be a one-time act, for that one person. But it can be the fact that they had a progressive sort of discipline that they didn't take enough. The department may have not taken enough action.
Absolutely. I understand that the events, the horrible events we've seen, and George Floyd is the most notable, of course, are a one-time event, horribly resulting in the guy's death. But the spectacle of other police officers standing around while this thing got worse and worse has troubled a lot of people. Let me talk about the most devastating effect of all of this on the people who serve in law enforcement, and that is we've talked about the physical problems that result in marriages that break up, the substance abuse that often results. The suicide rates are shocking. The last figure I saw was that suicide rates among active law enforcement are what, 3 times the general public?
There's some debate over that because with suicide prevention, the unfortunate part is that the stats are underrated. Right now, the current stats for suicide across this country are 48,344. But we really believe that's a 10 to 20% underestimation because can a one-car crash be a suicide? Can an accidental overdose be a suicide? Sure, but the evidence has to indicate it to law enforcement and or the coroner to have it classified as a suicide. So we know that every suicide is not counted. And there is no depository for law enforcement right now for suicides. So the one agency, there's a organization, and they actually collect their statistics through, Google. But we know that suicides always don't get into the media. But the suicides that do actually, we know that actually it's anywhere from 50 to 60 more than people who die in the line of duty.
Mm-hmm.
Suicide stats, they're not collected by the FBI. They're not collected usually by their local departments because, unfortunately, with suicide, it causes shame and stigma. And the last thing that really law enforcement needs right now is more stigma placed upon it.
Yeah.
But it was never actually tabulated in the first place because, what public agency wants to say that they have a problem with suicide.
I understand. But you've just said something stunningly insightful. I don't think I certainly have never thought about it. But it sounds like you're saying police are at greater risk, not from the civilian population that they engage with, even the bad guys, than they are from the risks, from the pressures of their job in the form of suicide. They are more likely to hurt themselves by their own hand than be hurt by somebody on the street. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So listen, that's just breathtaking, and it really gets to the core of this thing. You've got people in a tough job at a tough time, and we're not supporting them enough. The establishments, the people who fund this. I don't think it's a money issue. I think police have plenty of money. They're just spending it the wrong way. That's just an amazing thought. I know that we want to get an opportunity to talk about the suicide prevention program that you've been involved in for years and years. You're the past chairman and executive director of the suicide prevention in Pennsylvania. And you got a new, I guess, nonprofit coming up. What do people in crisis, law enforcement people in crisis need to know should they have suicidal thoughts? You want to give the phone number and make that clear?
Well, I think the big thing that not only law enforcement should know, that everybody should know, is that there is help out there and there is hope, and that there are people to turn to that you can trust. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255. And I'll say it again, 1-800-273-8255. And for those in the millennial generation, that younger generation, if they don't want to talk on the phone, they could actually text. And you can either call or text anonymously. If you contact and text to the crisis text line at 741-741, a crisis counselor will pop up and you can chat with them and tell them what's going on. And there are also other law enforcement peer support agencies all around. Like in Pennsylvania, you can contact them. Any police officer and or family member, if they need to, they can contact the Pennsylvania State Police Member Assistance Program or other, their local employee assistance programs in their police departments, if they have one, which is kind of scary that a lot of police departments don't have an EAP or one that they trust. Because, again, police need that trust factor to be able to open up and say, just a simple fact of, hey, I'm having a hard time with, seeing that infant die, or going on a crisis scene. But they might be thinking, because one of the biggest signs for suicide is never just one issue. Suicide is always multiple issues that somebody goes through to reach, to get to that stage, or they're, making a plan and thinking about suicide. But one of the biggest ones is relationship issues. We want that police officer and or his coworkers to say, just to ask the simple question, hey, how are you doing? What can I do for you? There is help out there, and I'm willing to help you. And you need to call this number, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number or whatever.
Right.
But they should be, hopefully people need to put, again, their pride away into getting help for themselves, because it just doesn't help their loved ones and their family, because a lot of people are obvious in their coworkers. Everybody's devastated when someone dies by suicide.
Yeah, we always see
and unfortunately, I lost my brother to suicide as well. So it's devastated myself and my family. I know that pain.
Sorry to hear that. We're gonna wrap it up on the corner here, but just this one last point that you make about it's unimaginable that even the smallest law enforcement organization in some town, much less the larger ones, wouldn't have a robust and effective employee assistance program. Maybe the next time they decide they need another half track or a bunch of SWAT equipment, they'll stop and go, you know what, let's fund this EAP program a little more robustly. And that might go a long way towards getting us all what we want.
Totally agree, because EAPs and peer support programs save careers, they save marriages. They can make a huge difference if it's a good program. And really, it's just that department or agency doing some research and getting their employees, their police officers, to trust in the program, because they have to back it and say, you know what, our job is to make sure that that you're going to work and have a great career, but we want you to end your career on a healthy note. We want you to end your career and enjoy your retirement because of all the hard work that you did. So,
the other thing is that the other thing is that maybe the community, maybe the civilians out there can also stop and before they start demanding that the local police have some kind of civilian review board, which is a good idea, but it always deals with problems after they occur, and start demanding that in their communities there are better support programs so that there are fewer, in fact, no bad apples in the police department. Govan Martin III, thank you so much. As I said, big topic here, hanging on the corner. We'd love to have you back at any time you want to talk about your work with law enforcement. We'd appreciate having you.
Great, Steve. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take care, everybody. See you next time on the Behavioral Corner. Oh, wait. Come here. I forgot. If you're listening to the show, and we appreciate that, you can write a review. You can write a particularly good review if you like, but you can write any kind of review. We love that feedback. Easy enough, I'm told, to review the Behavioral Corner wherever you're listening to it, on whatever platform you receive your podcast. We would appreciate that. And by the way, be sharp in your critique. Thanks. See you next time. That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.